Sheriff Whitman's face went ashen beneath the station's harsh, fluorescent glare as a black SUV's rear door banged open. Out strode a four-star general, silver eagles gleaming on crisp dress blues, whose very presence sent a ripple of shock through the deputies gathered inside. Only 2 hours earlier, that same sheriff had stormed an elderly woman's weathered pickup on a quiet Memorial Day drive, cuffing her on a back road without a shred of justification, then dismissing her protests as the ramblings of senescence. Now the full weight of the Pentagon bore down upon him. As news cameras streamed live into living rooms across the South, the stunned officers finally grasped that what they'd treated as a routine traffic stop had exploded into a national scandal. The sheriff's hurried commands, once unquestioned, sounded hollow under the general's cool gaze. The truth of the matter, captured by dashboard camera and handheld cell phone, was plain for all to see. For the bystanders assembled at the station's entrance, it was more than dramatic theater. It was a moment of reckoning, a vivid reminder that respect cannot be claimed by rank alone, but must be earned through integrity and restraint. In that suspended breath, deputies who had long operated under small-town assumptions and realized their actions had breached the very trust they had sworn to uphold. Before we continue, let us know where you are watching from in the comments below, and if you believe true respect begins with empathy, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of ordinary courage, confronting deep-rooted bias. Because this isn't just a tale of one sheriff's downfall, it's the story of how a simple Memorial Day drive laid bare a community's hidden prejudices and how one act of dignity seized the nation's attention. Stay with us as we uncover how justice found its way even when the badge seemed to stand in its path. Earlier that day, she navigated the familiar curves of Harmony Springs County's country roads in her cherished 1967 Ford pickup, a Memorial Day rite she never missed. The sun poured through moss-draped oaks, casting latticework shadows over weathered farmhouses and fields dotted with wildflowers. In the passenger seat lay a simple bouquet of magnolias, freshly cut for her late husband's grave at the Veteran Cemetery. At 82, her hands steadied the wheel with the same care she once used to steady the cots of wounded soldiers in field hospitals. Though the truck's paint was chipped and its rust spots apparent, the engine's strong hum reminded her that some things like duty and resolve never faded. She reflected on 30 years in uniform, the victories and losses born in distant deserts and cold European winters. Despite those honors, she knew well the sting of returning home, only to find her service overlooked or questioned. Yet the open road always brought comfort, a reminder that life could be both simple and profound. As she rounded a bend near an old barn, the rhythmic thump of tires on asphalt lulled her into quiet reflection. Then, without warning, a patrol car appeared in her mirror. Its bright taillights bobbed against the late afternoon haze, an unspoken command to pull over. She guided the pickup onto the shoulder with practiced courtesy, her hands rising to rest atop the steering wheel, an act of compliance she had taught generations of soldiers. In her rearview mirror, the cruiser idled, engines purr, replaced by the sudden stillness of what felt like a gathering storm. A broken taillight would normally mean a brief exchange of documents and a courteous warning, but she sensed an undercurrent far darker than any mechanical fault. Her heart tightened not from fear of equipment failure, but from the knowledge that all too often the uniform on her back and the color of her skin could turn courtesy into confrontation. As she waited, the beauty of the rolling fields around her felt both a sanctuary and a reminder of how fragile the peace of that moment truly was. Deputy Brooks and Sheriff Whitman stepped onto the gravel shoulder, the late afternoon sun glinting off their mirrored sunglasses as they approached the chipped fenders of her 1967 Ford pickup. There was no "how do you do," only the sharp crack of authority, license and registration. "Ma'am," Sheriff Whitman barked, voice flat and impatient. With steady hands, the retired colonel reached for her wallet and produced crisp credentials, a state driver's license, a Pentagon leave order, signed by four-star generals, and her military ID. Deputy Brooks took the documents without a word, skimming the pages as though searching for a hidden excuse to distrust them. Then trained eyes caught sight of something unusual in her passenger footwell, a gunmetal case secured with an intricate lock and engraved with unmistakable military insignia. Brooks's flashlight beam trembled slightly as he asked, "What's in the box? Classified property?" She replied, calm and measured. "I'm not at liberty to open it." Sheriff Whitman leaned in, lips curling with disdain. "Open it," he ordered. Decades of polished courtesy fell away in that moment, gone with the press of a badge-turned weapon against a lifetime of service. When she refused, Whitman's expression hardened. He cuffed her wrists so tightly the metal bit into her skin, punctuating his contempt with a muttered accusation. "Stole medals and gadgets, I bet." Brooke stood by, flashlight trained on her bowed head as she was led to the squad car. Each step toward that cruiser felt like a betrayal of every oath she had ever taken. The back seat, a steel cage on wheels, awaited her, its door creaking open as if inviting her into disgrace. For a decorated officer who had weathered mortar fire and hostile terrain, the indignity of that roadside arrest struck deeper than any battlefield injury. And as the deputies treated her not as a veteran, but a common criminal, the broken echoes of their assumptions rang louder than the call of duty itself. At the sheriff's station, the steady clang of metal handcuffs and the dull thud of clipboards punctuated the air as deputies filed into the booking area. Under harsh fluorescent lights that cast every surface in stark relief, she stood at the counter, wrists still bruised, quietly requesting a glass of water, her prescription, blood pressure medication, and the courtesy of a phone call. Each plea was met with indifferent shrugs or the crumpling of paperwork, routine forms taking precedence over basic human dignity. Behind the counter, the clerk tapped keys with mechanical detachment, eyes flicking only once to acknowledge her presence. The veteran service pin on her lapel, the folds of her dress blues, and the weight of 2 decades in uniform carried no sway here. Ordered to sit on the narrow steel bench inside a cell whose bars gleamed like prison lines across a map of injustice, she complied without protest. The cold metal pressed into her spine, the rough edges of the seat biting into her uniform trousers, yet she remained motionless, an embodiment of military discipline. Through the vertical bars, she noticed Officer Nicole Reed hovering nearby, her posture tense, shoulders drawn inward, as if bracing against the moral weight of the moment. Reed's gaze lingered on the veteran for more than a courtesy glance. It held recognition, a dawning awareness of a grave wrong unfolding before her. After what felt like an eternity, Reed slipped away under the pretext of checking files, her footsteps echoing in the hallway like a promise of compassion yet to be fulfilled. Alone in that stark cell, the veteran sat with perfect posture, spine straight, chin level each second, a quiet testament to her unbroken resolve. While the station's artificial glare sought to diminish her, it only highlighted the dignity she refused to surrender. In that silence, she became a living reminder that no amount of bureaucratic procedure could erase a lifetime of honorable service. And as the minutes stretched on, she steadied her breathing, prepared to meet whatever came next with the same unwavering courage that had defined her career. Officer Reed slipped back into the booking area, clutching a sheaf of printed dossiers whose weight seemed to shift the room's atmosphere. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, she laid them on the counter before Sheriff Whitman. The top page bore the heading Declassified Service Record, followed by crisp photographs. A young lieutenant in fatigues wading through rice paddies, another in a snowy European village, medals gleaming in remembrance ceremonies long buried from public view. Whitman's jaw dropped as he rifled through the documents, dispatch orders from Vietnam, covert mission briefs from NATO bases, commendations signed by generals who once served alongside her. For the first time, he saw the scope of her service laid bare in black and white, decades of sacrifice and skill that no tail-light violation could diminish. Before anyone could speak, the station's emergency line crackled to life with an urgent series of tones. Reed answered on instinct, her voice low but steady. "Reed here." After a brief exchange, she lifted the handset and turned to the group. "Archangel protocol authenticated. Colonel's identity confirmed. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs is en route." The name alone, spoken with restrained awe, sent an electric surge through the room. In the hush that followed, the weight of what had begun as a simple traffic stop settled in every mind. This was no routine detention, but a breach so profound that the military's highest office had been alerted. Whitman's pale face betrayed a storm of regret and fear. The veteran he had dismissed as a confused old woman was not only genuine, but a pillar of national security, whose credentials carried the force of a 4-star warning. Outside, the distant whine of arriving military vehicles blended with the pounding of Whitman's heart. As officers exchanged wide-eyed glances, Reed offered a terse nod. "Brace yourselves. This station just went from county jail to national stage." In that charged moment, the true gravity of her service and his grievous mistake became starkly, irrevocably clear. Without ceremony, 3 sleek black SUVs eased to a stop on the station's gravel lot. Their engines idled in respectful silence as uniformed military police and federal agents spilled onto the pavement. At their forefront strode the four-star general, each confident step resonating like distant thunder, his dress blues immaculate beneath the bruised sky. He approached the holding cell with measured resolve. Turning to salute the elderly veteran inside, he offered a voice both reverent and contrite. "Ma'am, I apologize for this disgrace." The salute lingered, a visible pledge to repair the wrong done to her. Then, eyes narrowing with unyielding authority, he addressed the sheriff. "You have violated federal law and wounded a national treasure." Behind the general, a uniformed military lawyer stepped forward and began reading official orders with crisp precision. By directive of the United States Army, both Deputy Brooks and Sheriff Whitman are placed on immediate administrative leave. All government property in their possession is to be returned at once. The lawyer's words carried the weight of the Constitution itself. At that pronouncement, Harper and Brooks, once so confident, moved forward to surrender their badges and weapons. Their shoulders sagged beneath the weight of their error as they handed over the symbols of their former authority. Cameras clicked insistently, capturing each solemn exchange for a world now watching. With a gentle nod, the general motioned to his aide, who unlocked the cell door. The veteran emerged bearing the dignity of every year in uniform and every hard-earned commendation. As officers rendered her medals and belongings, the crowd station staff, bystanders, and reporters broke into quiet applause. In that moment, rank and uniform reclaimed their true purpose: to protect honor, not defile it. And as the veteran stepped free, it was clear that justice, though delayed, had arrived at last. By dawn, the hashtag Salute the Colonel had swept across social media, lighting up timelines from coast to coast. News anchors replayed the dashcam footage in continuous loops, each frame underscoring the veteran's calm courage under fire. That same morning, the mayor convened a hastily called press conference on the courthouse steps. Under a banner declaring "Respect for all who serve," she announced the immediate termination of the officers involved and offered an earnest apology, praising the colonel's unshakable dignity in the face of disgrace. Local veterans and community leaders stood alongside her, affirming that Harmony Springs would no longer tolerate prejudice cloaked in a badge. 2 weeks later, in the polished auditorium of the Harmony Springs Police Academy, the veterans stood once more in full dress blues, medals gleaming beneath the soft glow of the training room lights. Rows of young cadets sat straight in their seats, each face turned expectantly toward the speaker who had become a symbol of principled service. Taking the podium, she spoke with the quiet authority of a seasoned commander. "Order doesn't make you right, listening does. A uniform doesn't make someone your enemy. It makes you a partner in preserving justice." Her words, delivered with gentle firmness, carried the weight of years spent navigating both battlefields and bureaucracies. She spoke of the sacred trust between those who wear the badge and the communities they protect, urging the recruits to remember every name behind every call, every face behind every report. As she finished, a hush settled, and then the room erupted into heartfelt applause that echoed long after the first clap. In that moment, seeds of genuine reform were planted across Harmony Springs. The next generation of officers, moved by her example of respect, born from experience, stood ready to carry forward the lessons learned from a single traffic stop that became a turning point for an entire community. Under the applause, it was clear that while one victory did not erase decades of injustice, it had sparked a change that would grow stronger with each officer who chose to listen first and act with true honor. 6 weeks later, the community center on Main Street bustled with a sense of shared purpose as Black, Latino, and white residents gathered for a reconciliation forum. Folding chairs filled every row beneath soft overhead lights, and portraits of past community leaders lined the walls in silent witness. One by one, neighbors stepped forward, recounting experiences of driving while Black, stops on familiar roads, arrests over minor infractions, and the heavy silence that followed in living rooms and lunch counters. Their voices, sometimes trembling, sometimes firm, wove a tapestry of pain long ignored. After the personal testimonies, state and local officials took the stage to unveil concrete reforms born of those stories. A civilian oversight board empowered to review complaints impartially. Mandatory bias awareness training developed in partnership with community advocates. Body-worn cameras set to activate automatically whenever an officer draws a weapon, and patient advocacy councils in every local hospital to protect vulnerable residents. As each proposal was announced, the room broke into tears and applause, sealing a commitment to genuine healing and the promise of a more just future. Federal agents mobilized in the pre-dawn hours, executing meticulously coordinated raids across 12 states. Evidence seized from the ex-sheriff's home server and documents linking him to the Heritage Protection Council exposed a covert white supremacist network embedded within numerous police departments. Dozens of officers and officials were handcuffed on charges ranging from civil rights violations to conspiracy and domestic terrorism, sending shockwaves through law enforcement agencies coast to coast. Back in Harmony Springs, local leaders gathered once more to sign the symbolic pecan pie pledge, committing their schools to inclusive curricula, their police to genuine community oversight, and their hospitals to unbiased care for every patient. The community center, still echoing with earlier testimonies, filled again as state legislators, veterans, and ordinary residents stood shoulder to shoulder in solidarity. As the forum drew to a close, the veterans stepped forward one last time. Her voice, steady with decades of service, cut through the applause. Remember, systemic change is not won in a single sunrise. It requires our vigilance every day, in every conversation, in every act of respect. Today we've made strides, but tomorrow we must keep walking this path together. 1 year later, the very stretch of Maple Street where she bled now bears a solemn bronze plaque reading "Honor Under Fire." In full dress uniform, the veteran returned to preside over a quiet dedication ceremony, cradling a folded American flag she described as a symbol of dignity and breached trust. Under the boughs of magnolia trees heavy with spring blossoms, uniformed officers snapped immaculate salutes, their polished shoes clicking softly on the pavement, painted with remembrance. Neighbors young and old, Black, Latino, and white, stood in respectful silence, reflecting on how a single act of intolerance had sparked a transformative journey. The plaque's inscription seemed to glow in the golden afternoon light as the community recalled the months of courage under pressure, the reconciliation forms, tearful admissions, and statewide reforms born from one woman's refusal to be silenced. This ceremony was neither grand nor ostentatious. It was marked by humility and resolve. A local teacher, once too timid to speak of past wrongs, quietly handed the veteran a bouquet of fresh magnolias. A high school cadet adjusted her uniform and whispered thanks for showing the way. Even a few officers who had resisted change now stood with bowed heads, acknowledging the wrongs that had been righted. As the folded flag was placed in its glass case, the veteran spoke only 2 sentences. May this flag remind us always that respect must be earned, not demanded. May this moment inspire each of us to guard justice vigilantly every day in every corner of our town. Her words, simple yet profound, landed like peals of church bells across Harmony Springs. A soft breeze stirred the magnolia petals, carrying the promise of ongoing vigilance. In that still moment, the community acknowledged that the path from hidden prejudice to emerging justice is long and winding, but that unwavering courage rooted in integrity and compassion can transform tragedy into lasting change. And so, beneath the magnolia shade and the watchful gaze of a grateful town, the veteran's legacy found its rightful place not just on a plaque, but in every act of respect that followed. From this story, we learn that justice does not arrive on its own, but must be ignited by steadfast individual actions, even when just one person stands against injustice. Power does not define right or wrong. Rather, dignity and the courage to speak out can transform outdated systems. Were you in that person's position, what would your next steps be? You would continue gathering and preserving evidence, share your story with the media to rally community attention, and partner with human rights organizations to pursue legal action against those who abuse their authority. You would also advocate for the establishment of independent oversight bodies and organize public forums between residents and law enforcement to ensure all complaints are handled transparently. As for whether racism will be completely eradicated by 2050, it depends on each person's sustained efforts and the strength of the community at large. History shows that prejudice always resurfaces if not addressed at its roots. Yet by maintaining diversity education from primary schools, through universities enforcing transparent laws and expanding cultural exchange programs, the generation born after 2050 could grow up in a society free of color barriers. The road remains long, but when each individual refuses to stay silent and when we treat silence as complicity, the foundation of a fair discrimination-free community takes shape.